Parents have known for generations that boys are different than girls. That's hardly a new idea. I mean, you know, for 5,000 years we've understood that. There's been no debate about it. But in the late 60s, and some of you aren't old enough to remember this, but in the late 60s, a really goofy idea came along. A really crazy idea. And it was the notion that males and females are identical except for the ability to bear children. And that boys and girls are different only to the degree to which they've been raised differently. Gloria Steinem at that time said, parents need to have the courage to raise their boys more like girls. And so there has been this culture-wide effort to implement this simple idea that boys and girls are identical except for the ability to bear children. Believe it or not, boys and girls like different things because they are different. At six years of age, a girl is about 6 months ahead of a guy in terms of language development. And it stays that way. I mean, even into adult life, women have more proficiency with language. Now, this is a very important question that I want to ask you all. Is masculinity good or is it bad? Is it right or is it wrong? Are boys biologically defective? What you see and what we're talking about today, is that the result of the fact that boys need to be fixed, that they're not quite the way they ought to be? Is that the design? Is that the plan? Testosterone is not one of God's big mistakes, although it is true that girls seem to have most of the right stuff. I mean, they do. They make better grades in school. They get along better with their teachers. They get into fewer problems. They challenge the system less often. They get hurt less often. Have you noticed that girls don't like pain? They don't. And if they make a mistake, they try real hard not to make it again. If boys get hurt, they think it's bad luck. And they go back and do it again. You know, because they're coming from a different part of the universe. So the question is, would it be better if boys were raised more like girls, as Gloria Steinem suggested? Boys are men in training. Don't resist this nature. It was God's design. Don't fight it. Don't try to manipulate it. Go with the flow. It's not a mistake. It's not an accident. And begin to get those boys ready for the role of provider and protector that's built into their nature. You know, they're men in training. Teach them to be respectful to women. Teach them never to hit a girl. Teach them never to take anything from a girl that doesn't belong to him, something that is precious to her. Teach him to give. Teach him to be a person of self-control. Teach him to be loyal. Teach him to be honest. Teach him to care for others. Teach him self-discipline. You just don't let this aggressiveness run wild. You have to civilize it. You have to shape it. You have to mold it. And that is your primary responsibility with boys. And teach them reverence for God and for His principles. That's the responsibility we have, not to make them like girls and not to resent the fact that they are not quiet and cooperative and easygoing. Yeah, they are sometimes harder to raise. Not always. Sometimes girls can be hard to raise too. But boys are typically harder to raise. Go with that. Accept it. It's the way boys are. Boys are in a great deal of trouble today. Most parents do not know this. Many school teachers do not know this. But the child development clinics around the country, on the university campuses, the child development experts, are all saying this. I mean, this is appearing in the child development journals. Research is coming out on it. And there's really not much doubt now that boys are in a great deal of difficulty. That problem has to do with the breakup of the family, the disintegration of the family. And it is, of course, taking place at a very rapid level. This is why you see divorce is so much more difficult for boys than it is girls. The research all shows this. The things I'm telling you today are not simply my opinion. This is what the perspective now is by those who study children. This is one of the reasons boys don't know what it means to be a boy. They don't know what it means to be a man because they haven't seen it modeled. And this is why single mothers simply must find a role model for their boys. They need to find it from Boy Scouts. They need to find it from boys' clubs, or perhaps from a coach in organized sports or disorganized sports, any kind of masculine leadership. But they need to find it somewhere, because a mother is simply not equipped to explain to a boy what it means to be a man. And there must be a man there somewhere to make this happen.
Robert Stoller said masculinity is an accomplishment, it's an achievement. And this might explain why we have more male homosexuality than lesbianism. Some people say 2 to 1, 5 to 1, 7 to 1, because it's easier to be female than it is to be male. If you do nothing, the male will not become masculine. Something has to happen. So-called primitive societies, we have rites of initiation, male initiation rites, but we don't have that. We're losing sight of that. Everything is co-ed activities. So the boy needs special help in making that masculine adjustment.
Many boys of all ages have no clue what it means to be masculine, because they've never seen it modeled. Exactly. It's certainly not on television. They have not seen it in the movies, and many of them have not seen it at home. I've mentioned this already in one of the videos, that when our son was 5 years of age, we would go out to get in the car. The whole family was going to go to eat. And there are 4 of us, a boy and a girl, and Shirley and me. And Ryan would very typically say, "Hey, Dad." I'd say, "What?" He'd say, "Us guys will sit in the front seat. The girls will sit in the back seat." Now, he wasn't lording this over his sister and his mother. He was saying, "I'm like you. I'm a guy like you. Us guys are going to sit in the front seat." And that was a healthy thing, you know. He was identifying with me. He's saying, "I want to be a man like you."
A little twist on that, my interpretation, the first time I've heard this, I think he was lording it over that. The boy has to feel...
Well, I didn't want to say that.
Part of being a boy is feeling that being a boy is special. You're lucky to be a boy. And I know that sounds chauvinistic, and we'll teach him later about reality, but right now, at that point, he really needs to feel that it's special.
You know what? I affirm that. I went to a hunting trip in South Dakota recently, and there are about 20 people there. And I've done this for 7 or 8 years. I go every year with about 20 guys. And this year was the first year that the women have been invited, and a few sisters. And some of the boys that are invited are pretty young. One of them was 11 years of age, and he deeply resented that. Exactly. He resented the fact that the women were invited. Now, it made for a very fun trip. You know, some of the women hunted, and some of them stayed in the lodge, but it was neat having them there. So I didn't object to that. But he did, and I understood it. And he felt like, man, this is a guy thing. This is something us guys do together. And he resented the fact that his sister and his mother were invited to come along.
And this is why this co-ed activity is really not such a healthy thing, I think. Boys need to be separate to affirm their masculinity. They need to be away from girls, have that distance, so that they can be so solid in their masculinity that then they can return to women, but return to them as men. So it's like a pendulum. You leave the mother, you deepen your sense of masculinity, and then with that, you can return to women and be in relationship with them.
what advice would you give to a single mom who has a sensitive boy and the father is either absent or, in worst case scenario, gay himself?
Again, you have more work to do because you don't have a father around. So you have to affirm his masculinity. You have to make him feel good as a boy, not only as your child in the neutered sense, but as your son, as your boy. Also, I would try to find some father figure. Maybe an older brother, your father, a father figure who can get more involved with this boy if the father is not being involved.
And you can find role models for them, but you have to work hard to find them. And you can't do it. I hate to say it, you're not equipped to show a boy what it means to be a man because you've never been there. Now, most women were little girls when they were young, and so you can't do that. So, Boy Scouts, boys clubs, church youth groups, youth pastors who are male and who are confident in who they are and who will affirm your boys. School teachers, coaches, organized sports. There are so many places that you can get it, but you absolutely have to get it. An uncle, as you said, or a neighbor, or someone who can show your boy what it means to be male. You've got to find that, don't you?